Hello and welcome to Kinship Earth Connections. I'm Lauren Archer, and today I'm delighted to introduce you to our guest, Russ Gaskin. Russ is a co-founder and managing partner in CoCreative, a consulting organization that supports collaborative innovation for multi-stakeholder groups working on global systems change. While Susan Davis Moora founded many successful KINS innovation networks and did much of her work intuitively, Russ and his team at CoCreative have codified what already works and turned that knowledge into tools and resources and templates that incorporate the most effective methodologies and approaches for people who come together to solve complex problems. When you visit their website at wearecocreative.com, you'll see that they generously offer free access to their tools and frameworks as a way to help us all build the capacities that we need to lead and participate in collaborative innovation projects. Prior to launching CoCreative, Russ served as the Chief Business Officer of Green America, a global leader in developing economic strategies to advance social equity and environmental sustainability. He served as Managing Director of USSIF, a pioneering membership organization for financial firms and institutional investors doing impact investing, and he founded the Green Business Network, the first network of triple bottom line businesses in the U.S. Russ currently serves as a senior fellow for the Green America Center for Sustainability Solutions and on the expert panel on social innovation and design at the United Nations Development Program. So Russ, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your work? Just kind of give us a background and orientation. How did you first get involved with the KINS networks? And I know you're still kind of collaborating with Elisa Gravitz and many others. So paint us a picture, if you would, of some of the background on how you got started in your work.
I have no idea when I met Susan. I just know it was a long time ago. And and so I don't know when I was introduced to KINS. It feels like in some sense it's been in my blood for longer than I can remember, from early formative life experiences, just this sense of we need to be able to come together and work together, not just across our differences, but leveraging our differences toward the kind of world that we want. When I met Susan, or at some point after that, it was probably in the context of working with Elisa at Co-op America, which is now Green America. And it may have been related to the development of Solar Circle, which is one of the longest running KINS networks that I know of, and or at least that I was familiar with. And it was, in some ways, felt very natural to me, but also it was interesting to me that this was the kind of thing that Susan did. Like, you can actually do this and do it as a regular kind of, not a regular job, but as your work, right? And then there was certainly a time when I got to know Susan more personally, and we connected more personally, and that was mostly around when I was kind of transitioning out of Green America and transitioning into the work that I do now at CoCreative. And Susan was very interested in how KINS was being adapted, evolved, expressed in different ways by different people. So she was really fascinated with what we were doing at CoCreative. And I have to say, Susan is almost constantly present in our work, because if we have a philosophy at CoCreative, I would say we draw on a lot of disciplines, something like 26, 27 different disciplines that we've documented, like improv and organization development and Gestalt and lean and all these things. But the core philosophy is best embodied by Susan saying, if you want to change the world, throw a better party. We feel like that's what we're doing. We're just hosting better parties where we can come together and work together on things that are meaningful to us in a way that enhances joy and thriving and well-being and a sense of we can do this, right? A sense of efficacy.
That is so fat. There's so much to unpack there. You just give so much information. So first of all, what I'm hearing is you were doing some work with Green America and
Yep.
the Solar Circle, and met Susan, and then you got this idea like, hey, this can really be my work. And it sounds like it was a calling for you in a way, like it comes naturally. So tell us a little bit, for those of us in the room who might not know what CoCreative is, can you paint us a picture and then tell us a little bit about how you have taken what you did in the work with Elisa and Solar Circle, and now you've expanded it really to include a lot of other collaborative innovation projects and groups?
Well, let me start with the second part, because that's a bit of the lead up.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't involved in Solar Circle, the development of Solar Circle, but I was observing Elisa and Susan collaborating on developing that.
Okay.
And it was over years. And so I was intrigued because this whole thing was happening kind of alongside our work at Green America. And it was clear that there was a real deep partnership between Susan, I would say, probably really leveraging Susan's intuition and insight, and Lisa's kind of process knowledge and expertise about how to get people in the room to actually do things meaningfully and productively together. So I was watching that dynamic and really intrigued by that. And we were doing things at Co-op America, then Green America, that were along those lines. Like in 1999, we discovered that there was a dearth of capital flowing into community development financial institutions. And those are banks, credit unions, loan funds that by their missions are tasked with investing in economically marginalized or low-income communities. And we started to ask around. At this time, we were running US SIF, or the Social Investment Forum. And so we had relationships with a lot of these folks, and it was out of a biennial report that the Social Investment Forum did, where we discovered that there was this problem, because we were hearing from all these different community investment groups, we have a lot more demand for capital than we have supply. And so we thought, wow, let's solve this. Like, who needs to be in the room and how do we figure this out? And it wasn't, I would say, a super complex systemic challenge, but it wasn't easy either. And so we just kind of intuitively said, well, we probably need to get some money managers, financial planners, advisors involved. We probably need to get some investors involved. We probably need to talk to, the fund management folks who run mutual funds, et cetera, because we were looking at, well, who has the money, and mutual funds were holding a lot of the capital, right? And really, it was just through all these one-on-one conversations and bringing people together, saying, how do we move the dial in this? We figured at the time we needed over $1 billion, like $1.2 billion of net new capital inflows into those institutions to meet the demand. And so the group kind of came up with a number of solutions. One was a way to securitize these community investments so they could be traded on trading platforms, for example. So we worked with Calvert Social Investments at the time, and we needed a way for investors to assess the nature, like the risk profiles of these investments, et cetera. So they established a way to do that. They did all these different things. And then I think the key was they created a mark, 1% for community. So if your mutual fund committed 1% of its total assets to investing in these community development financial institutions, you could then promote that to your investors. Like, we're investing in rebuilding America's communities. And it was a really competitive market. So that little point of differentiation was really valuable. Mm-hmm. And we ended up tripling the goal, like $3 billion moved in a few years into CDFIs, which then created another problem, is they had oversupply of capital, right? But it was just like, we just kind of looked at that and thought, wow, we did it. That was cool. And we didn't really stop to think, wow, the way we did that is interesting. And it wasn't until years later that I realized we did something there using a process of getting diverse voices in a room, looking at the whole thing together, having a greater kind of shared purpose and intent. All these ingredients that now inform the way we do our work at CoCreative, the way Susan has done her work for many years. We just kind of did it. We didn't think it was anything really interesting. And it was only later that I thought that was really more cool than we thought.
I love
So
it.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it
start
was
off kind of
then how do we
intuitive.
systematize?
Yeah.
What's that?
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, it sounds like it started out intuitive, but then you looked back and said,
Yeah,
oh, wow, what were the actual things that made this work?
and very much honoring Susan's understanding of intuition and the importance of intuition in her work and in her life. Yeah, I mean, it was entirely intuitive.
Wow.
And it was only later that we kind of analyzed it kind of methodically and rationally. And we thought we could actually turn this into a process, right? We could make this a method. So really the whole quest at CoCreative has been, how do we not only understand how to do this more systematically and intentionally, but how do we help other people learn to do that too?
Yes, so true. And, that's what I've heard, that Susan had such a gift when she would bring people together and start kins groups. It was very much intuitive. Yes, she did a lot of research, but her intuition was very strong. So for those people who want to make change in the world, but maybe don't have quite that level of intuition, what you have been doing is kind of codifying, oh, this is this way, and this is another way. So what I saw on the CoCreative homepage is that you help people who want to come together and work together, even people that don't necessarily like each other, which I thought was really
Mm-hmm.
relevant, right? And that's the human condition right now. Is we have a lot of division, we have a lot of people with different ideas, and yet in order to move the ball forward, to progress, we have to learn how to work together. And so tell me a little bit about some of the tools that you've developed, and or some of the methods that you've identified blending this work together, if you would. I know that's a big question.
Yeah, and there are many, so it would depend on the context and the situation, but essentially we think of our work with others as co-creating and supporting the conditions for people to collaborate effectively together on complex systemic challenges. We're not telling them how to do it or what to do or whatever. We're really kind of systematically, methodically creating the conditions for it to happen. Because we think people have, maybe not innate, but they have a natural capability to think together, to understand complexity, to leverage different perspectives, et cetera. And so in some ways, we're removing the things that often get in the way of that kind of good work naturally happening. So one of the things that's really core in our approach is we call it the four agendas. And this came about because in our trainings, we would ask people, very different groups, different parts of the world, et cetera, virtual, in person, we would ask them all the same question in trainings. And that was, what does it take to collaborate effectively for systemic change?
Good question.
And of course, the medium is the message. We weren't starting by saying, here's what it takes. We were asking diverse groups, what do you all think it takes? And they would generate a whole bunch of stuff. And you would see common things like trust. A lot of people would put up trust, relationships, etc. Other people would put up things like a plan, an analysis, a way of understanding the system. So people would put up stickies in whatever form, and we'd kind of cluster them. And we started to see patterns over time in what different groups were generating in response to that question. And the patterns kind of clustered into four areas that became these four agendas. So one is connecting. Are people who need to be working together on this challenge connected in trusting relationships? Do we have the right people in the room? And it's essentially about connecting an effective ecosystem of change or network or whatever you want to call it. But who needs to be in the room? What's the quality of their relationships? Now we know there's a lot of research about the importance of relational trust in change initiatives. But at the time, we were just using the data that people gave us, right? The next is aligning. So are we deeply aligned around a meaningful shared purpose? Or even beyond purpose, just our intent. What do we intend to make happen in our community, in this industry, whatever? And that is so key that we often start with the intent. Then we start like Susan did. I want to make solar happen for the world. I'm going to talk to people and find out who has energy for that. So in some ways we do that, which is different than some other approaches to systems change or complex change. They often start by the connecting agenda and then figure out a goal. We say, who wants to do this? We want to talk to those people. And so aligning is really, there's a greater purpose that transcends our individual differences, our individual opinions about what should be done or how we should do it, that binds us together in some deep way. And it's transcendent, right? It's bigger than any one of us. So we know that none of us can achieve it alone.
Yeah, that's important.
And then the third agenda is learning, which is probably a really commonly embraced one. What do we need to learn about ourselves, about the system we want to change, et cetera? And usually the collaborations we support have a very explicit learning agenda. Here's what we need to learn about next: trauma-informed care, or ACEs, or the role of central banks in banking policy as it relates to climate change, or whatever the network is inquiring into. There's a very kind of intentional agenda for learning. And then the last one is often, I think, maybe the most neglected by collaborations, but we call it making. Like at some point, we need to make something. We need to make a strategy, a plan, a set of interventions, et cetera. And so that's where we get into prototyping and iterating on different kinds of interventions to see like what starts to move the system in the direction we want to move it in. You could call that other things, but we ended up calling it making, so that we'd get connecting, aligning, learning, and making calm. We like acronyms.
I love it. That's great. It's a great acronym, easy to remember. And yeah, it's like a flow of all the different, and it almost sounds like, I don't know if you've mapped it to earth, air, fire, and water, but you know, the different kinds of personalities and the different elements that it takes
Totally.
to put things together. Yeah.
We haven't mapped it to the elements, but we did at some point realize each of the four agendas. And by the way, the reason we call them agendas is because we think, well, we have one agenda. No, we want to keep track of multiple agendas. How are we doing on connecting? How are we doing on aligning, et cetera? But at some point we realized each of the four agendas correlates with an aspect of human experience. So connecting relates to our hearts, right? I know when I'm in a group and I feel deeply connected to people and I know I can trust them and rely on them, that's a heart-centered sense, right?
So true.
Aligning, actually, we associate with the spirit. Because if we're really deeply aligned around a greater transcendent purpose, the only way you can describe that is it's a spiritual experience, right?
Yeah.
Learning the head and making the hands, maybe the hands and the feet, like where we roll up our sleeves, get our hands dirty, right? Actually get into the work.
Yes. Yeah, beautiful. Very, very well-rounded and grounded. And you know what occurs to me is so many people, if you're not in this realm and you're not in this work, and you may try to come together with colleagues or, you know, people in your community to try to make a change, and you don't have the tools or the skills or the understanding of this concept, I can imagine that people might get stuck a little bit. So I bet you've got some stories on how you've helped people get unstuck, or, you know, the types of projects you work with.
Yeah, we've been asked more and more to do turnarounds of collaborations, especially collective impact initiatives, where people have, like you said, gotten stuck. In one case, it was because they had Robert's Rules of Order. They had a whole huge governance structure. They actually weren't doing very much because they were so focused on governance. We actually don't think about governance at all at the beginning. It's about energy, momentum, depth of our commitment, et cetera, right? Governance is, we'll figure that out, right?
Hmm.
But they would find various ways to get stuck. And essentially we're coming in and saying, let's go back to why. Why are you doing this? What's our intent here? What's our purpose, et cetera? Let's set aside governance. Don't worry about that for now, right? And other places that groups are getting stuck are they have so much difference and they don't know how to work with it. And yet difference is really key to success. Like we need those diverse perspectives in the room. But once we get those diverse perspectives, it can be paralyzing if we don't have some ways to kind of work with that effectively. So yeah, there are other things that happen, but it's often around we've kind of gotten stuck in awareness about the problem and awareness of our differences, and we don't have the conditions to help us move through that productively. So a lot of our work will focus on, again, how do we create the conditions for that so we don't get stuck in these things?
And that sounds so organic. I mean, that's like nature, right? When you just create the conditions and, it's like tilling or not tilling, but it's like fertilizing the soil, making sure that the environment is appropriate. I want to bring up though what you mentioned about differences. So I know you have free tools available on your website that you generously share with people. And there's one about the different kinds of personalities that show up. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how people can use, say, for example, that tool or some of the other PDFs that you have available for downloading?
Here's the thing, Lauren, we have so many tools. I'm not even sure about the one you're referring to. But there will be people who just come from different perspectives, have different value sets. Like we each have our own individual culture, right?
Yeah.
And then we have all these meta cultures, like, ethnic differences and all these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we found profoundly helpful as a tool for working with all those differences is polarity thinking. And this is something that has been developed, well, for eons, really. Early Chinese philosophy, yin yang, Taoism, etc. More recently, especially by Dr. Barry Johnson at Polarity Partnerships, because basically what it is it's saying every value has another value that it's interdependent with. So if I'm really big in my organization on everyone being accountable and delivering on what they need, what they commit to doing, etc., and my partner is very committed to support, I want to make sure everyone is supported to do what they need to do to be successful, that they have the resources they need. We could argue all day about accountability versus support and which one is more important and etc. But we know, our deeper selves know, at the end of the day, if we're going to be successful, we need high levels of accountability and high levels of support.
Mm-hmm.
And we see these polarities show up all the time in every collaboration. Some are very specific to the collaboration. I could give an example of that. Others are, they're just constantly present. Like the thing about, in one network, Clean Electronics Production Network, there was a kind of polarization starting to happen in the group. Many participants, particularly the companies that were involved in this collaboration, wanted some quick wins, right? They wanted like short-term deliverables, like we got to show that we're doing stuff, which made sense because they were trying to get their companies to stay involved and stay committed to the work of clean electronics. And they needed to show progress. They needed some kind of like, hey, look, here, everybody, we're making progress here. others in the network, especially the NGOs and the worker representatives that were from civil society, really wanted to focus on deep systemic transformational change. They wanted to like reinvent the way that electronics production was done.
Hmm.
And it started to get more and more like us versus them, this kind of thing. And we finally said, there's something here. This tension actually could be really productive and rich. And we mapped that tension between quick wins and systemic change. And people saw we need both. Like now that I say it, it seems obvious, but at the time it was just like, wow, that's so cool. Because what they could do then is they could say, how do we create an agenda for transformational change and a strategy for deep transformational change in the sector, and create quick wins and early victories, visible progress within that larger strategy. And that became like a frame that everybody could use together, that not just respected, but leveraged and honored the differences that people were carrying.
That is
So that's really core in our work, that we're constantly using that.
Yeah. So looking at the tensions, identifying the tensions, and then also mapping that in terms of what's the polarity, different styles, different types of people,
Yeah.
relevant to the ultimate goal. And I think that's the beautiful holistic perspective that your work brings in. And, any humans trying to get together and working on a project, stuff is going to surface. We're humans. And so that skill set required. So I know that, your organization brings in facilitators and works live and in person with collaborative groups. And so for those, people who want to work with you, I know you've got a long waiting list, but people can go to We Are CoCreative. Is it .com, .org?
.com.
wearecocreative.com, and reach out to Russ. But for those of you who are maybe, a little strappier, starting your own group, working on a community, you can definitely check out the tools. And can you share? I know you said there's so many. What are some of your favorites? What are some of the tools that you think that people trying to work together, making change in their community collaboratively might want to know about?
One is the Collaborative Innovation Roadmap, which is our version of a process model for, hey, if I want to do this, if I want to bring together a bunch of different people and work on a very complex challenge, where might I start? And then what would I do after that? It seems like very elemental, but often people are just stuck. Like, should I draft a goal? Should I start talking to people? Should I just have a meeting and see who shows up? Right? These are very basic questions that, frankly, we have some ideas about, and so you don't need to kind of reinvent the wheel. We've kind of taken the best of what we've learned and made it into this roadmap, so that you can kind of just use it as a guide. Right? The map is not the territory. You shouldn't follow it exactly in any circumstance, but it gives you at least a starting point or a template for the process. There are also resources related to use of self. So a lot of this work calls on me to use myself more effectively, more intentionally. And we call that use of self, or other folks call it use of self as an instrument of change. So our framework is about awareness, like noticing awareness practices, etc. How do I deepen my awareness of my own biases, like my polarity preferences, for example? How do I deepen awareness of what's happening at multiple levels of system? So there's a great resource specifically on that called 8 Lenses for Systemic Analysis. So 8 different kind of pairs of glasses I can put on when I look at a systemic challenge, and it gives me a different way of looking at it. One lens might be power, the other might be levels of system, the other might be a pyramid from events, patterns, mindsets, etc. So, and then as I develop as I develop my awareness, then I go into my intention. What is my deepest intention here? And Susan is really beautiful about that. Like, it's not just her intuition, it's her intentionality that I think has made her so powerful in this work. And then we go to choice. How do I expand my range of choices so I'm not operating on autopilot, but now I see more options for how I can lead this work, how I can engage this difficult stakeholder who triggers me in every meeting or whatever, right? And then the final dimension of that framework is courage. How do I cultivate my courage? How do I get support so that I can be courageous? Because eventually, at some point, doing this work, it's going to call on me to do something that I haven't done before, that makes me afraid, that makes me anxious, whatever. So how do we create the conditions for each of us to be courageous? There are so many tools, though, and we also have trainings, which people can see in the training section of our website. And we give away the course materials too. So if somebody said, "Hey, I'm a true self-starter, I don't need to go to a training, or I don't time doesn't work for me, or whatever," just reach out to us, and we're happy to share the course materials.
Wow. Talk about generosity. That is fantastic. Yes. Can you
Well, another principle of KINS, right?
Totally. Absolutely. Yes. When you and I first spoke, you said that was something people said you were crazy for just giving away a lot of your tools, but it ultimately works out to your highest advantage for your organization and the work you do. So there's proof in the pudding. I'd love to know a little bit about the training. Just let's say somebody's interested. What can people expect from taking a training with you?
There are a few courses. The intro course is 3 sessions, about 3 hours each, maybe 3.5 at this point, but relatively short sessions. And what people will certainly learn about the CALM framework, the 4 agendas: connecting, aligning, learning, and making. They'll also learn about some of the like, how do we structure these collaborations? Not getting into governance so much, but what are the different roles and structures, etc. We look at the qualities of the kind of people that we engage, and that's something where Susan was very much leveraged the power of her intuition. She just knew her intuitively whether someone would be a fit for a certain collaboration or something. We've systematized that a bit more. So what are the qualities and attributes we look for? And then we get into the roadmap, the process model. So let's start with drafting a shared intent, and how do we then socialize that with people and strengthen it, not weaken it as we talk to more and more people, but we're building energy around it. And then we consult with people. So we talk about 2 kinds of interviews: system leader interviews and empathy interviews, which we use for different kinds of stakeholders. What do you do when you actually bring people together the first time they're all in a room together? That can be a scary moment, because that's when the stuff gets real, right? So those are the kinds of things we cover in that course. And then we have another course that goes more into the facilitation. So what do you actually do methodologically, and in terms of your use of self as a facilitator? You could be a convener, but you're also facilitating. So we focus on that piece.
In your mind, facilitation, for the difference between a convener and a facilitator, just what would you say to somebody?
Well, in some of the trainings, we explore this polarity of leading and facilitating. And we talk about what are the benefits that leadership gives us. It gives us clarity. It gives us a call. Somebody's kind of like putting a stake in the ground, that kind of thing. Whereas facilitating, we make sure that we're leveraging our differences, that everyone's being heard, that we have inclusive, equitable processes, etc. And so we don't favor one or the other. We favor the kind of beautiful integration of those 2 things, right? We can all lead. We can all support the effects of facilitation, etc. And so when I talk about convening, it's like, who's calling the people together? that may be the person who's facilitating the meeting. Often it's not. But those people need to be working in deep partnership. So you said earlier, we often facilitate. To be honest, we try to do that as little as possible. Like, we're good at facilitating. It's certainly an expertise of ours, but we're always trying to kind of like decenter ourselves in the work and build the capacity of that change ecosystem to organize themselves and support themselves. So so we're often the facilitators at first, but people in the system start to take on that role over time.
That is
Constantly trying to put ourselves out of work, I think.
Well, I love that. Yeah. And that's sort of this general movement that we're seeing into decentralization and more of a, cooperative, collaborative culture in how things get done. So what you're talking about, creating the conditions, providing the tools, the awareness, the insight, so that we as, flailing limited human beings with our, various understanding can come together and maybe lean into, oh, this is bringing something up in me. I've got a trigger here around something, or, gosh, how come that person's always trying to push it in one way? And what you're doing is helping to create a ground of being where all is welcome. And that's what it sounds like to me. And then the tools to help people be able to get over some of those stuck places. So such a valuable thing.
Yeah, Lauren, I would also say we don't expect everyone to be like us or to be so interested in process and facilitation and learning all these methods and whatever. It's like, I'll do plumbing inside a room. I won't do plumbing behind the wall, right? I'm going to hire a plumber to do that. I don't want to learn how to do that because, and probably, I have evidence that I'm not very good at that. And so we're not trying to say everybody needs to learn about this. If your thing is about health equity in your county and you want to focus on that subject and you're a subject matter expert, et cetera, then we'll partner with you and bring the process side to complement your leadership on that issue. But over time, we're just trying to build capacity in communities, in industries, et cetera, for the people who do want to do the kind of work that we do. And that's frankly really fun to see the amplifying effects of our support of others.
Yeah. Wow. So valuable. Thank you so much. If there were a piece of wisdom that you would share with a new group, for example, I see a lot of groups in my work coming together, trying to solve pretty massive global scale problems and figuring out how to do that together. What would be just one of your favorite pieces of wisdom or words of advice?
It's probably not different than the question I would ask an individual if I were coaching a person and the person seems kind of like unsure about how to proceed or whatever. And it's a pretty simple question. What do you want? I think the surest way to get grounded, at least initially, is what do I want? What do I want to see happen in this health system or this industry or whatever? And then I start to talk to other people and say, here's what I want. What do you want? And do our wants align? And if so, how much do we really want this? And if we really want it, let's go talk to other people. So it really starts with those one-on-one conversations. But even before that, I got to be clear about my own why, my own purpose, my own intent. Not that I'm going to determine how we get there or who's going to be involved, or I'm not going to make those decisions on my own. But I do need that fuel, right? I do need that sense of I'm really both feet in this. And often I think when people get lost or confused, it's because they're looking around so much when maybe there's power in looking inside and really accessing their own purpose.
Yeah, that brings it back to that spiritual dimension, right? That's the fuel, the why, the alignment, making sure that your desires and your purpose are in alignment with the direction that you seem to be heading in. And if it's
Yeah,
not
Susan would call it a destiny path, right?
the
Like
path, yes,
if
absolutely.
you know that, then you've got clarity about what you need to do in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think of it as the fire, the flame. And, people get demotivated when the flame goes out for whatever reason. So it's keeping that alive. Yeah.
Mhm.
To give us an idea of how your work really has a measurable impact in the world, can you share an example or two with some of the clients you've worked with?
Yeah, these are ones that I can at least roughly talk about. So I mentioned Clean Electronics Production Network, and that has very specific activities related to a number of very large electronics brands committing to eliminate exposures to the most hazardous chemicals that are used in the global electronics supply chain. And that's having a rippling effect across other companies who are also now joining in that work. And that whole kind of process includes companies requiring their suppliers to report what chemicals they're using and what volumes, what protective measures are implemented in each of their facilities, et cetera. And for the first time ever, all that data is getting aggregated into a single database so that Apple, HP, Dell, Cisco, et cetera, can say, hey, we've all got a supplier that we share that's a hotspot for worker exposures to hazardous chemicals, or at least the risk of that. Let's collaborate and improve that situation in that supplier or with that facility. So it has enabled a level of strategic collaboration across who companies that might otherwise certainly are in some cases direct competitors, but
Mhm.
they're able to work together now in a way that they never were to eliminate those exposures. So
That's
that's one example from industry.
mhm.
Another example from more social kind of issues is we supported the startup and development of a collaboration in Hawaii called Nakama Haloa. And Nakama Haloa is the children of Haloa, the original Hawaiian ancestor. And the original intent with Nakama Haloa, when it started a few years ago, was let's let's ensure that we have relational permanency for every Native Hawaiian youth who's affected by the child welfare system in Hawaii. Because you get kids who are not just separated from their parents, but they might be taken to another community and separated from their siblings.
Oh,
You can
wow.
imagine you're 6 years old, you're living with a bunch of strangers now. All those connections have been broken. Some of them certainly haven't been healthy, which is what's causing that. But and so it was this idea of relational permanency and how do we keep these strong connections, not just to family, but to Ohana, my broader family, right? The people I call auntie, like my neighbor that I'm not biologically related to. How do I stay connected to my community, to my Hawaiian culture, to the land, Aina, etc. And so that was the original intent. And now what's evolved is um, they've been working with the statewide child welfare system in the state of Hawaii to integrate education about Native Hawaiian values and culture. And really, it's about now rebuilding the way the child welfare system works in Hawaii, which they have a lot of progress around, to really center traditional Native Hawaiian ways of caring for children. And one of those is Hanai, which is the state doesn't take away the child and decide what to do to protect that child. The community, the ohana of caring family and extended family, come together and they decide how to care for that children in a way that keeps the connections to family, to culture, etc. And so when you talk about systems change, that's like fundamental, right? We're changing the very drivers and fundamental assumptions on which the child welfare system is operating. Now that's long, slow work, right? That's not going to happen partly because there's federal guidelines and federal monies that determine a lot of this, et cetera. But they're making so much progress in kind of reorienting the Hawaiian child welfare system toward Native Hawaiian culture and values. And you can just feel the difference now in the way the system is connected and working.
Wow. And that started with a question. It didn't start with, we're going to come in and do this. It sounds like it started with a question, how can we? Right? Or
Yeah, yeah. Certainly there was a core group of people who were saying, you know, we're failing these kids and maybe we're having victories, but one from another collaboration, one of the stakeholders said something that stuck with me all these years. This was in Northern California. And that is, we're failing our children one program at a time. Because they weren't getting to the kind of deeper systemic issues. So it was really like, how do we go deeper in this work and not just do one program after another or helping one kid at a time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. You mentioned something that I kind of want to riff on a little bit here, and that is the length of time it takes for a lot of these changes. And so having the perspective and the long-term vision and being able to to measure progress along the way, is that built in to some of the structures when you start working with these collaborative initiatives?
Well, certainly that's one of the drivers behind why we need a powerful shared intent. Is only something that we're like committed to in our guts, in our bodies, is something we're going to stay with over years, right? Solar Circle is now in year 20. What kind of commitment does that take, right? But it's also like create the conditions for, as we do the work together, we experience learning and joy and growth and all these things. And that keeps people coming back. We do find something weird, Lauren, which is around year 2 of a collaboration. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but you might be driving along on a highway and you're going the speed limit 55 or whatever, but you don't feel like you're going fast because maybe you're even going 70, 15 miles over the speed limit, but you don't feel like you're going fast because you're at a constant speed. And research actually supports that. And which is part of the reason people speed is because they don't feel like they're going fast because they're not accelerating. And it was weird. In year 2, we started to see in different networks that people would be like starting to lose steam and dropping out of the work a little bit or whatever. And we realized that's what was happening because they were doing great work, but they were losing momentum. So we thought, oh, what we need to do is around that time, we need to kick up the ambition even more.
How do you
And then we started to say, like, hey, let's relook at our goal. Let's relook at our analysis. Like, how do we do 10 times what we've been doing? And suddenly people are like, well, I'm paying attention again.
Yes. Wow.
So just weird dynamics that we tend to see, but that was a particularly interesting one to me.
All right. Well, I want to also bring it back to that phrase you mentioned at the beginning, and that's throwing a better party. So this is not laborious. This is not, forced, labor. This is people coming together with passion, with connection. So from the heart, with learning, always growing, and then actually being able to do things together. And how rewarding and how fun is that? Susan always says, how much fun can we have? Yeah, it sounds like you're having fun with what you're doing, and so are your clients.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, anywhere we can bring more joy and meaning into the work, that's what it's all about, because this doesn't have to be painful. I mean, it might be painful as we grow and learn about ourselves and others, but the work itself doesn't have to be nearly as painful as we tend to make it.
I love it. What's on the horizon for you? Anything you're looking forward to in the next couple of years?
We have a somewhat bigger team, so that's more difference. And we've intentionally looked to cultivate a team where everybody has unique perspective, a unique gift, et cetera, that they can bring to the team. So we're looking for more larger projects because we we've never gone out and looked for requests for proposals or things like that. We've kind of generally ignored that kind of thing. Mostly pretty much all working on word of mouth. But I think we're going to start going after these larger projects, multi-year projects where we can bring together a larger team, because that fuels our own learning for each of us, to be working with a diverse team and sharing ideas about how we might approach this challenge, etc. So more learning, more growth. That's always the plan, but that's our path next toward that.
Yeah. So in terms of the folks watching our interview and the people in the KINS network, how would you like people to support your work or participate with what you're doing? Any invitations there?
Well, certainly people could share our materials. We did find, as you noted earlier, that even though we made the decision, so I'll just share 2016, we thought we should do strategic planning. None of us wanted to do it. And so, because we just thought it was boring, and so we said, instead, let's come up with a really interesting question, and then we'll just work on that question. And the question we came up with for the team at CoCreative at the time was, how do we grow our impact 5 times faster than we grow our firm? And one of the first decisions out of that was to give away all of our, quote, intellectual property. Because we wanted to, it's like, I don't want to spend my time suing people for using our stuff. I want people to use it. So let's give it all away, and et cetera. And so it turned out that it also was a really good business decision, because people call us from all over the world saying, hey, we use your materials, they're great. We now think maybe we could use your help, and then we talk. So yeah, we love for people to get the materials, to use them. If they never call us and they're doing good work, and frankly, we benefit from that, right?
Yes.
All these people doing good work maybe more effectively. And then the other thing would be, we're really looking for more ecosystem partners. So we do a lot of work with a global network called Ashoka, which is a network of social entrepreneurs, about 4,000, I think now, around the world, working on all kinds of different issues. And we've partnered with Ashoka for a number of years now, helping to build capacity for collaborative systemic change in the Ashoka community. And so right now, what we're looking for is, who are those, what we would think of as multiplier partners, with whom we can partner, we can reach more people more deeply, because they're already a part of some kind of community. So that's a very specific thing, but that's where we are and what we're thinking about, how to grow our impact 5 times faster than we grow our firm.
Beautiful. So multiplier partners. So if you're listening to this and you feel like that speaks to you, you're a multiplier partner.
Yeah, you're in some kind of like global network or national network or whatever. Yeah, we'd love to talk.
There's a lot of our audience, which is very exciting. Yes. Well, Russ, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us, and for all the amazing work that you're doing. I know I probably didn't touch on everything. So is there something that you wanted to share that I haven't asked you, or any, closing thoughts?
I just want to share my appreciation for Susan Davis and her way of being. I think she's had, in some ways, a quiet, like she's not a very well-known, famous person, but a deep effect on so many people. Not just the way we work or the way we think about how we work, but what we think is possible in the world. And so I'm carrying that with me kind of all the time. And to Elisa too. Elisa, I think, opened my eyes to possibilities that I maybe didn't imagine or whatever. And now people look at me and they think, you think that's possible? And I'm like, oh yeah, because we've done it, right? But really, those two people have inspired that optimism and hope in me in so many ways.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us. And so for those who want to reach out to Russ, check him out at wearecocreative.com. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Archer with Kinship Earth Connections.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you for joining us for today's Kinship Earth Connections event. We encourage you to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. To learn more and get involved, please visit us at kinshipearth.org.